The first step is to prepare the area around the kiln, cutting back the grass and weeds that have grown over the past year. Last year's typhoon has scattered these metal roof panels all over the ground. This year's cleanup is not going to be an easy one. This is the kiln, under this corrugated metal sheeting and the blue tarp. Okay, let's open up the kiln and see what's inside. You can see that this kiln opens from the top. These thick metal plates lift out of the way one by one. And then the raw wood goes in from the top. The kiln gets sealed up again. And when the process is done, the lid is opened up and the charcoal removed. This jointed chimney part is used when taking the wood vinegar. There's a variety of other things in the kiln here too, and more chimney parts. And then we've got bags of dirt for sealing it up. And this clay, which is used to line around where the metal panels go and any other cracks and seams that form in the kiln. So the next step is to start felling some trees. Here I'm cutting down a Sugi, or Japanese pine, which doesn't actually get used for the charcoal itself. It gets used as fuel for firing the kiln, and as well it gets used in closest the side that gets fired, because it's often the case that that area turns to ash, and so we don't really want to use the good wood in that section. We use a wood that is softer and is not such a loss if it ends up burning. And of course we need to cut the wood that gets made into charcoal. Here most of the charcoal that we make is used for our personal use, and so we're not too picky about the variety that we're using. The harder tree species are the best, and around here the hardest and longest burning charcoal is generally the tsubaki, or camellia wood. Once the tree is cut down, we need to cut it to length so that it fits inside the kiln. So here we're using a measuring stick just to put marks along the bark, and then we know where to cut it. Here you can see some of the wood that we've cut up to basically into lengths that'll fit into the kiln, or longer lengths that have been marked so that we know where to cut them. And now we need to carry it over to the kiln. But to do that, sometimes you have to make a bit of a path. Here you can see the way we stack and line up the wood from thinnest to thickest in the order that it'll go into the kiln. Some of the larger wood we'll cut into chunks and then split so it's easier to handle and get into the kiln. And then if we ever have any extra, sometimes this just gets moved over to be used for firewood. So here I'm just cutting some thinner branches to be placed along the floor of the kiln, and that allows us to keep the wood that will be charcoal up off the base of the floor and ensure that it turns to charcoal all the way from the base to the tip. Here you can see how we seal the metal panels for the roof and around the edge of the kiln with this red clay. Finally, the kiln gets sealed with ash around the edges and bags of fine dirt onto the top. Once the kiln is all sealed, it's finally time to light the fire. This happens in all sorts of weather conditions, so as you can see here, sometimes we have to cover the kiln again with the metal sheeting and then just keep on firing it through the rain. At this point, we're watching the smoke coming out of the chimney, keeping an eye on how it looks and also the temperature. Here I am checking the temperature one last time before going to bed for the night. I want to make sure that either the fire isn't going to go out or also that it's not going to rise too quickly through the night and turn everything to ash. At this point, the heat coming out of the firebox is quite extreme, to the point where you don't really want to spend a whole lot of time in front of it. When the temperature of the smoke is between about 80 degrees Celsius and 150 degrees Celsius, it's right in the range for collecting wood vinegar. So there's an extension to the chimney setup, and that can be placed over the usual short chimney stack, separated a little bit so that you don't affect the speed of the smoke coming out. And that allows you to divert that smoke up the long chimney, and it cools as it goes along the length of the chimney and then drips back down and can be collected in these metal pails. If the chimney parts were to be touching, then you'd get a really fast draw, and the whole process of making charcoal would go too quickly. But then if you space them apart too much, you often won't collect the smoke that you're trying to get the vinegar from. As the process continues, the temperature inside the kiln continues to rise, and along with it, the temperature of the smoke. You'll also see changes in consistency as well as color. You notice a change here? And how about here? Getting much bluer. As we approach the end of the process, things start to get very clear. The temperature now is well over 250 degrees Celsius coming out of the chimney. And if you look up close, you notice it looks like nothing is coming out at all. But as we back off the shot a little bit and the light passes through the smoke coming out, you still see a bit of the blueness that was evident earlier. Finally, we test it with a match. How many seconds does it take for the match to ignite? Okay, and now it's time to seal up the kiln. So we take the chimney off and start sealing everything back up from the chimney side, making sure that no air is able to get in and no smoke is able to come out. And everything is sealed up nice and tightly so that after a couple of days, the kiln has cooled down enough that we can open it back up again and take out the finished charcoal. Now over to the firebox side, where we cover the entrance with fire bricks and then line the outside of that again with more clay. As an additional measure against air getting in or out, we put this wooden board setup in front of the firebox and then pour several bags of earth down into that space to create another just little insurance cushion in front of the front firebox. That's some good charcoal. And the last step is to put it to use.